Herzlich willkommen bei den Kaffeemachern. Heute mit einem mega komplexen Thema, Furan. Was ist das? Wir fragen die Wissenschaftlerin Anja Rahn, wir sind bei der ZHAW und schauen uns das mal an. Hello again to a new Kaffeemacher video. Today with a very complex topic, furan. What is it? What does it do? We asked the scientist, Anja Rahn. We are at the University of Zurich. Here we go. Anja, furan. Everyone is afraid of furan. Everyone is working on furan. What is furan?
Furan is a molecule not unlike acrylamide. It's generated during the roasting process of coffee and it's unavoidable. So at high temperatures, a lot of chemical reactions occur and furan is generated amongst all the deliciousness that we associate with coffee. So when you roast coffee, you unavoidably form acrylamide, furan, and it ends up unavoidably in your cup. So that's why people are afraid of it.
Why are they afraid? What does it do?
Well, there's basically an organization called the International Agency of Research on Cancer, and they assessed furan as well as other molecules for their toxicity. So when you isolate furan alone, and then you look at what sort of toxicity, the dose, how much you need, what it affects for organs, and then it's classified, and basically furan is possibly carcinogenic, so it's type 2B. I should highlight though that coffee from the same organization is basically type 3, and it was basically downgraded I think a year ago to be basically not classifiable as to carcinogenicity. And unfortunately, people rather talk about furan than coffee as a beverage.
Right, so we still can drink coffee.
Definitely.
Right.
It's a bit of a complicated story because you look at a molecule and you know it's basically potentially dangerous for consumption. And then the beverage itself, there's no evidence that it's actually dangerous for you. Nevertheless, regulatory agencies, they have to assess whether different products are of risk to your health, basically. There's no government that wants to put their consumers in danger. And so they look at, all right, how much do people consume? How much is there in any product? And then they look at, all right, how often do people consume it? What age group? Because it's all about how well your body can metabolize it. Unfortunately, people love coffee and we drink it quite often. And it's in there at high doses. Basically, when you roast it, you create a lot of it, and then unfortunately, especially in the whole beans, there's quite a bit.
So everything that is roasted can potentially produce furan.
Yeah, unfortunately, furan's not like acrylamide where you say if the product has asparagine and you process it at a high temperature, you're going to get acrylamide. It's shown from a chemically mechanistic pathway that it can be formed from fats, it can be formed from carbohydrates, from some amino acids, and so we can't pinpoint what's the most productive way it's being formed within food. Nevertheless, when you process a food at high temperature, furan will be generated.
Anja is doing research on furan. Let's have a look how she is doing that research. So with what tools did you do the measurements?
We use tools similar to this. Basically, we don't have any data to show you because we just upgraded our equipment. But basically it's a GCMS. And
what does it mean?
Gas chromatography mass spectrometry, and that allows you to look at molecules specifically. In my research, furan's sort of special. It's not like acrylamide, where basically it's not as volatile. Furan is very volatile. It has a boiling point of 32 degrees, and we brew coffee at a much higher temperature. So the question is, how much do we lose when we brew coffee, and how much does the consumer in the end get? We found that basically the type of how you extract the coffee, whether it's through a fully automatic machine, a filter machine, whether you drink preferentially soluble coffee, this all has an influence, as well as whether you rather drink your coffee at a higher temperature or you allow it to cool. And basically, if you have a high temperature, you actually lose quite a bit. There's only about 10% of what you get at the very end.
So I should drink very hot coffee to avoid furan.
See, there's a catch-22 with that,
Right.
because the same agency with international research on cancer, they basically classified hot beverages as possibly carcinogenic or probably carcinogenic because they can scald your mouth and your basically esophagus. So the more you damage yourself, the higher likelihood is that you develop a cancer. The drinking, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, I see.
Food, to eat healthy is not a simple thing. So basically, the drinking temperature, the average from 1 or 2 publications, there's not much research on it, is around 60 degrees. If you drink it higher, 65 and above is considered to be possibly or probably carcinogenic. So people that drink even hot tea at that temperature are likely to have issues later on. But yeah, so generally 55, 60, you should be fine with drinking coffee.
Now, you've written 2 papers on
Yes.
furan. Can you give us a brief summary of the 2 papers?
Sure. The first one really looked at the influence of the type of brewing method as well as the cooling temperature on furan content. And we found that fully automatic is a very efficient extraction, and basically you find that furan is very efficiently extracted through it because it's a closed system. Whereas filter coffee, there are a few things that can reduce furan content. First of all, it takes about 4 minutes to brew a cup of coffee or a jug of coffee or a pot. And then the entire time it's being heated underneath.
Right.
So it's actually driving the furan away. And then you're pouring it. Pouring actually helps decrease furan content.
So no
Every
espresso,
little bit.
filter coffee? Yeah, okay.
Every little bit helps. And then it
Because
takes
it's so volatile.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you're also diluting it. Basically, the brew ratio is also quite large, so you get a lot more volume extracted for a filter coffee than you would an espresso or fully automatic machine. And that also helps because it dilutes furan, so the consumption.
So is it too simple or too simplified to say I rather should drink filter coffee than espresso because I reduce the amount of furan that I intake?
I don't think, as a scientist, I don't really look at that in that way. I think coffee brings much more joy to people, and they shouldn't become paranoid about it because coffee hasn't been rated as a carcinogen. So you can't just restrict yourself because something potentially is dangerous. It's like not driving a car because you might get in an accident.
Right.
And you know, the likelihood that you're in a car accident is probably higher than you dying of something in your coffee. Because there are a lot of beneficial things in it, there are antioxidants, there are a lot of things that regulatory agencies do not focus on. Food is not like a medication where you consume it in a pure form. There are hundreds of compounds in coffee. And just like you learn from your medication, there are interactions.
Some of them are anti-carcinogenic, right?
Yeah, well, they're antioxidants. There are a lot of ones that we haven't even identified yet. And with medication, you really look at, your doctor tells you, all right, don't consume this at the same time. Well, the interactions also happen in coffee. It's not a pure substance, so furan can interact and become completely nullified. We don't know that. So instead of becoming paranoid and me sort of telling you only drink filter coffee and such, no, we have to understand it so we know that there is sort of a higher concentration or a higher exposure within coffee. That doesn't necessarily make coffee dangerous.
Okay. So you've written a second paper about furan.
Yeah.
What is the outcome?
Well, it's yet to be accepted, but basically we're still looking at consumer exposure, and we wanted to know, one of the things that you come across in literature is that the exposure is dependent on the fat content. And this has implications within coffee because people like adding milk to it. Now, it's not a simple story, again, because you have different fat contents, and so you might, in Canada, we basically add a 2% milk, but then you go into a cafe and you might get a 12% fat content creamer.
So that the more fat I consume with coffee, the more exposed I am to furan.
We basically found that it does influence, so the higher the fat content, the higher furan will be retained.
At the same time, there's a huge discussion on an international level. So the European Union is about to release some new rules and regulations.
Yeah.
What's your take on this?
Considering we don't know, we haven't identified most compounds within coffee, I think it's sort of a bit negligent, to be honest, because these are reactions that we can't properly control. And just because you can reduce furan, it doesn't mean that you're not promoting a more dangerous pathway. So by reducing one risk, you might be elevating another that you're unaware of. So I think there needs to be fundamental research involved so that we basically can intelligently control the reactions occurring within coffee. So as a scientist, I'd love to understand it completely and then be able to basically give people a healthier coffee to drink.
So you would say the European Union is acting prematurely?
Definitely.
Right. So what shall we do now? We can keep on drinking coffee, we can enjoy coffee, and you wouldn't say it's not too high of a risk for anyone?
I don't think no, because you have to look at it this way. Some things bring joy into your life and they add quality. Coffee is one of those things. No one has to drink coffee. We just love it. So I think the joy is much a greater benefit than making people worry about something in an already stressful environment. Like, leave coffee alone. It's not as bad as we think.
So another thing that we sometimes confuse in the same discussion is the difference in coincidence between furan and acrylamide. Anja is going to explain the coincidence and the correlation between the two, right? Furan and acrylamide.
So basically, if you're roasting, you're going to find that, all right, you're going to dehydrate and then you're going to sort of like that. And sort of...
That looks like a tasty coffee. It really does. High energy in the beginning, penetrate the seed, short development time.
I'm
Fantastic.
improvising a roast curve. Basically, you're going to find that acrylamide peaks when the initial Maillard reaction. Acrylamide is a Maillard reaction product, and you expect it to basically start growing, and then it will decrease.
That's acrylamide.
Yeah.
Good. And we find it on bratwurst, on
potato chips.
Potato chips, right?
Potatoes are renowned for it, basically because there's a lot of asparagine, and then you form acrylamide with any carbohydrate. So it's a Maillard reaction product, and it peaks at that point. Nevertheless, acrylamide is very reactive. That's why it's potentially or probably carcinogenic. It's type 2A. So it will actually decrease. What we think, or what I suspect is happening, is that it's reacting with other components within the coffee. So it's becoming another product. Now, as this decreases, you get basically, furan will still be there, but it basically starts going up. So the darker you roast, the more furan you get.
And the lighter I roast, the more acrylamide I have.
Yeah. Now, acrylamide has a drawback, is that because it's not volatile, it remains in the cup. So whatever acrylamide you have in your bean after roasting, almost 100% will end up in your cup. Nevertheless, a lot of Maillard reaction products are pretty tasty.
So
avoiding this is sort of like avoiding a lot of like the nice aromas that you want as well. So
that is carcinogenic as well.
it's a higher classification, so it's probably alone though. It's as a pure substance, it's probably.
Right. So would you tend to lighter roasts or darker roasts? In terms of health?
Health. If you want to sort of reduce your chances, dark. So Italians, I think of
So one thing they do right about coffee is roasting coffee pitch black dark.
Yeah, because you lose a lot during during grinding. You lose about 30% of the furan in your bean, and then you lose another 30%, and then during cooling it goes down to about 10% of what was in the bean itself. Yeah, acrylamide on the other hand, regardless what you do, 100%.
Right, so but if I prefer light roast coffee, what I do, then I just reduce my intake of hot roasts and anything like chips and all
Anything
that stuff.
processed at an elevated temperature, pretty much. Because coffee, potato chips, it's all 200 degrees above.
It's tricky.
Yeah, they're delicious.
I see.
But there are a lot of good things that happen. And from a scientific perspective, as I said, this is a tasty window for coffee.
Right.
Roasting further is sort of degrading more of the structure of the coffee. So it's an interesting phenomenon. And it probably has to do with more complex carbohydrates. So yeah, you don't have to really, as I said, this is science, and there's legitimate science behind the claims. Because a lot of people in the coffee industry sort of don't want to, they think there's something faulty in the science, but if you look back, there is a legitimate, there's a lot of good science behind it. But you should really, what people don't understand is that people are looking at food as a pharmaceutical. Like regulatory agencies are trying to regulate it like a pharmaceutical. And coffee is not a pure substance. It will never be.
Right.
And there's no use in regulating it like a pure substance. I think EFSA last year just started an initiative for impure or multi-compound systems. So I'm hoping that will take off and they'll have much more reasonable regulations for food or expectations, because it's unreasonable, especially I think as a detriment to farmers, if, people are roasting it one way and then this farmer has so much acrylamide in their product. It's not fair. They can't do anything about the raw material. If there's asparagine in their beans.
So now we have the research, we have new regulations that will be issued by the European Union. What's next on this topic?
Unfortunately, there's always another toxicant to look at.
What is the name we need to remember now?
Well, in my research, we didn't only look at one furan, we looked at all of the furan compounds. So there are methylfurans involved, and some of them are even higher than this one. So
that's not the end. It's just the start.
no, people find things to worry about even when there's a good product on the shelf.
Right.
Like, I really don't want to scare people with the entire acrylamide or furan story, because it's not necessary, and they shouldn't not enjoy their coffee by worrying that they're going to die an early death. It's nothing of the sort.
They should
Like, if you-
rather keep smoking and drinking
Exactly. Actually,
excessively alcohol.
coffee was
things.
actually ranked higher because they found in their studies basically almost a lot of coffee drinkers were also smokers.
Okay.
And smoking is a type 1 carcinogen, and it's guaranteed you'll basically have lung cancer.
Right. Hey, thank you very much.
No worries.
I didn't get everything, but I just pretended I understood everything. So we have a look at it, and we just come back in a couple
Yeah.
of months and let's see what the European Union does. And then we ask you again how you would interpret this.
Yeah, well, politics and science are two different animals.
Right. Good. Thank you very much, Anja. Thank you for watching Kaffeemacher. We see us next time.